59 seconds. 59 seconds was all it took for an entire Boeing Dreamliner to take off, lose all power, and then crash into a college canteen, killing 290 people. So far, at least. By the time the smoke's been cleared and the rubble's been removed, who knows how many fatalities the world's most recent aviation tragedies going to have racked up. This is the case of Flight AI-171, already India's highest mortality rate of any crash in its history, and all of the victims haven't even been accounted for yet. Let's get into it. Like we always do, we're going to start at the very beginning. The flight in question was registered as Flight AI-171, and it was scheduled to fly from Ahmedabad Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Airport to London's Gatwick Airport on June the 12th of 2025. The craft was 11 years old, and as of now, we have no confirmed background information on its maintenance history or any previously reported incidents, because those records are sealed for the time being. Officially anyways. A whistleblower who worked for Ahmedabad Airport recently came out saying that the Boeing 787 Dreamliner had a string of problems leading up to the crash. This included hydraulic leaks, flat malfunctions, and multiple flight cancellations in the past 6 months. The source claimed that the airport was taking dangerous shortcuts with the repairs, desperate to get the Dreamliner back in the air to avoid halting its 12 weekly flights. Now, I need to make this clear. This first source has not been verified, nor do we have any official documentation to confirm his claims, but a lot of what he said can be proven true. Flight AI-171 was on a 12-flight per week schedule, and the airport in question's been suspected of rushed repairs and unsafe procedures for years now. The short runway, squeezed into a heavily populated area, has been under fire for ages. Extending the runways has been constantly halted by political and internal strife, not to mention the budgetary conflicts. Then there's the long-running issue of repeated safety violations picked up during audits. But time and time again, Ahmedabad Airport has been slow in making changes. And yes, the plane's regular route was cancelled multiple times in the past year. But we don't have any documentation to indicate why this was. So the source here isn't just full-on empty waffling. A lot here checks out. And then there's the fact that the Dreamliner, the exact same model that's the subject of this video today, has been under fire since they were released, outside of scores of technical issues reported by passengers no less. There's also been many cases documented by manufacturers and engineers of premature fatigue and misalignment in the fuselage, all caused by improper assembly starting at the factory floor. Engineers and staff have been warning us for years, usually at great threat to their jobs and Boeing's long-standing nasty playbook of suing the daylights out of employees who dare to speak out against their corporate overlords. And this isn't us just throwing junk information into the air. These issues have been through courts and are still in the middle of active investigations. It's all on record, just go look it up. With that said, the rest of the crew looks like they were up to date with their training and had no major safety or disciplinary concerns on their records. Captain Sumit Sabharwal was 55 years old, with 8,200 hours of flight time behind him, and First Officer Clive Kunder was 32, with 1,100 hours of flying experience on his own records. Most of the passengers have not yet been named, but we do need to mention one by the name of Vishwas Ramesh, a 40-year-old British national who was visiting family with his brother Ajay seated right next to him. Vishwas was placed in seat 11A, located right next to an emergency exit, a placement that would later save his life. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Let's get back to the takeoff. At exactly 13:38 that afternoon, they left the runway, heading into clear and sunny weather, the perfect conditions for flying. In the minute after its wheels left the tarmac, they reached only 625 feet in the air before the Mayday started blaring in ATC speakers. The captain was calling in complete engine thrust loss, meaning that both the engines had lost the power to keep them in the air. And indeed, that's what it looks like from the footage we got from the ground, as well as the sole survivor of the crash. Vishwas reported from the hospital bed that the lights flickered twice, then shut off completely. The red and yellow backup lights came on, and then the world imploded around him. From the outside, it looks like the plane just fizzled out, rising straight and balanced, and then it just suddenly lost speed midair, going down with no power to accelerate it at all, lower and lower, like a paper plane gradually losing air. The lack of dramatism, smoke, or any other sign of emergency from the descending plane caused a moment of confusion on the ground. Civilians looked up, staring in confusion as the plane dived down, straight into a busy street in the Meganinagar area. Lunch hour on a regular Tuesday afternoon had just gone from mundane to absolute insanity in less than a minute. A fireball of flame, smoke, and debris rose above the skyline. Flight AI-171 had crashed into a medical hospital of all things. At that very moment, trainee doctors, their teachers, and various medical professionals were sitting down for lunch before heading back to classes and medical institutions where some of them were interning at. There were more than 30 people inside the cafeteria, not counting the dozens of others in the building. Vishwash said that the moment of impact was a blur of deafening noise and chaos. When he came to, everything around him was so thick with smoke and dust that he couldn't see more than a foot in front of him. All he knew is that his brother next to him was dead, and that there was a door barely hanging on to only one hinge right next to their seats. So he madly started kicking at the door, knocking it completely off, and stumbled out into a street that looked like the focal point of a 90s apocalypse movie. Bloodied, bruised, and in complete shock, Vishwash didn't just walk out on his own two legs. He identified himself coherently to first responders and answered all of their questions in the ambulance. It wasn't until he reached the hospital that Vishwash allowed himself to believe that he was alive after all. The side that Vishwash was sitting on did not make contact with the building. That single pocket he was in just happened to not be covered with rubble, or else he would have died from smoke inhalation in minutes. Vishwash survived under miraculous circumstances that day, allowing him to see his wife and children again. The same cannot be said for the other 241 passengers and crew, or the surrounding buildings and streets. Inside the hostel was utter destruction. People were screaming, crying, and jumping from windows to get away from the flames. Those that were able were dragging their friends and superiors away from the multitude of fires that were blazing all around them. Across the street, doctors, nurses, and medical students rushed out of the university's kidney sciences department and started hauling everyone they could find to cover. When emergency services arrived just minutes later, they came upon a strange scene that combined the unhinged chaos of a monumental disaster with the well-organized efforts of trained medical professionals that had already removed dozens of living victims that were neatly lined up and receiving aid at their deft hands with supplies taken from the various buildings belonging to the university that lined the street. Had it not been for the location of this crash site and the sheer luck of having a large number of people qualified, or in the possession of learning to become qualified in a number of medical fields, the death toll would have been double of what it was. There is no doubt about that. Some of those very students and doctors accompanied ambulances and continued to care for the injured, even though they sported minor injuries from moving rubble and carrying out the wounded, and were technically victims themselves. The ironic blessing of where AI-171 went down has not been lost on the survivors. Right now we know that there are at least 36 dead and 60 injured from the hostel alone, many of whom who were still holding eating utensils in their hands were found with food still inside their mouths with plates in front of them. Of the 280 confirmed fatalities from both the plane and the hostel, just over 100 have been identified. Undoubtedly, this number is going to rise exponentially in the next few weeks while the rubble is being cleared and the remaining bodies are removed. So far, Flight 717 is the 7th most fatal aviation crash in the history of aviation, and India's worst crash to date. And that's just the current state of things. If the estimates are right, it's going to end up being in the top 5 most devastating disasters by the time all of the victims are found. Since the crash is still so fresh, the investigation is still going to take months to complete. Years if you count the inevitable lawsuits that are bound to follow. And then there's another facet to this that we haven't mentioned yet. Ahmedabad Airport changed ownership just 4 years ago. Originally, it was operated by the Airports Authority of India until it was taken over by the Adani Group, a company that owns or operates multiple airports all over India on a 50-year lease. The Adani Group were just about to start a complete revamp of the airport, which included buying up more land to extend the dangerously short runways that we mentioned before. The place was in a state of serious disrepair and was running on years' worth of bad management and negligent procedures, not to mention many instances of rushed and cheap repairs to save time and money. The Adani Group took up the lease with the very intention of giving the airport a major makeover, and they would have started their overhaul years ago, but the Airport Authority of India has been the main reason that the necessary changes could start taking place. If it weren't all for the bureaucratic potholes that Adani had to deal with, a whole lot of the seriously concerning operations wouldn't have been an issue anymore. Or at least these concerns would have been in the beginning stages of being actively tackled by now. Who is culpable for what's looking like a crash caused by negligence is going to cause a courtroom circus, that's for sure. But no one can deny that there are too many red flags in this airport's history and on that plane to ignore. Someone's responsible for this horrific tragedy that's likely to be the cause of more than 300 people's deaths. So, who's to blame? Boeing? The Adani Group? The Airports Authority of India? Maybe a random engineer? Or was it simply pilot error? Once we find out what's happening here, you guys will be the first to know. That's a promise.